What is going on, my Atomic Autoworks friends? Today, we're going to be working with primer gel. I like to call it primer gel because a lot of body guys get stuck in primer gel. They can't get out. They just keep doing the same exact thing over and over again. And what it is you'll hear me say a lot, there's certain steps and procedures you do when you're doing body work, right? And so you want to sand your body filler to a certain grit. When that body filler's on, you want it all even, the surface. You want to see that body filler, and then you're going to put your primer on it. Nice even coats. You get your primer on there. You can guide coat it and block it. And when you get to a certain point, it's going to be sanded with that grit, and you're not going to break through in a lot of spots. And then you're going to go through and put your next layer of primer on. Now, there's many ways to do this. On this vehicle, what we ended up doing is we roughed out all the body work and got it closed, and then went and moved to a 4-to-1 primer, which is a very thick primer. The reason you use this primer is you're not trying to get out dings and dents. You're trying to get out overall waves over the course of a larger area, and that's why we use larger sanding blocks. And the reason I'm talking about this is, one, I just watched a video of people arguing about this, and it seems like a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about don't think it's important to use the Lexan blocks, and it is. If you're trying to do a high-end show car, if you can't see it, don't do it. If you can see the difference, you do it. And one of the reasons also I'm doing this is because we're literally living a problem with that right now that we just ended. What ends up happening is on these vehicles, you try to get your body work really close. You get it so close that you feel like you don't need primer. Then the next step you go to is your 4-to-1. Your 4-to-1 is a very thick, high build primer that we put across, and it's going to cover everything, but we're not trying to cover or hide anything. What we're trying to do is make sure we got uniform coats across the whole vehicle so that when we block it, we're blocking out any long waves. Like I said, not little dings and dents, but the entire waves. So when you sight the car and you look down the vehicle, you don't see any long waves. We're not worried about dings and dents. Dings and dents, if you have a ding and dent and you're putting 4-to-1 primer to try to hide that, you got a problem. You shouldn't be doing that. What we ended up happening is this car already had 4-to-1. So we should be able to go through it, and it is a thicker primer, so a lot of times you'll cut it with a more aggressive sandpaper like a 180 or 220 to start, but you always want to end up at a 320 or 400 and get it really fine. If you have enough millage left over, which is you have enough material that's thick, a thickness of material, you could actually paint right over that and go. Most people don't. Most people are going to seal it another time or prime it another time because you want to make sure you have enough millage, a barrier of primer or sealer between your body filler, metal, and paint. So this one was already done. So technically, if this was done right, we would have been able to come in here, block this thing with about a 320 or 400, seal and paint it, seal, sand and paint it, or reprime and repaint it with sand it with a 500 or 600 grit and go if we were doing a show car or something. So this isn't a show car, but we want it to look nice. It's a local show car, so if you bring it to a local event, it should do very well in that event, not nationally. When you're still doing it, you want it to be right. So now I caught the person sanding this using, I don't think I even have them because I threw them all away in our shop. They had them on their own tools. But picture a 3 to 4 inch foam sanding block. So when you're sanding this like this, what you're doing is you're putting basically waves every here. You're sanding out any small low spot that might be this big, but it's a soft block and it's not gonna cut it down. So where we were at this car, 4-to-1, we should have been sanding for the completion on the home stretch, ready to go. But once I saw this, I knew we had a problem, and I'm gonna show you why. So here we are up close and personal, and you can see I already ran the block across it one time, and I didn't think it would do it this fast. So at this point, if we had 4-to-1 sanded this was a big block, this would be laser straight the top of this fender, right? So I'd be able to take our sanding block and start going over it, and we would have no, wait, look at this. I had to use a 220 grit, which we shouldn't even be at that stage right now. We should be at a 320, 400, or 600. One pass, everywhere you see a dark spot is a low spot, and this is a high spot. So on this one fender, there should be, at this stage, there should be nothing. If there was a large block used like we always use, you wouldn't see this. And so I hear people on a lot of videos arguing about that it's not important to use hard blocks, that you could get away with using small blocks. And I'm telling you, you do not know what you're doing, and you do not know what you're looking at. If you're trying to build a daily driver just to kind of mess around with, yes, you'll get away with that. But on a show car, you won't. And this, at this stage, would never be a show car. When you heard me say I like to, at certain stages, have it very consistent. At this stage, after we already 4-to-1 primer this one and guide coated this, we should be able to sand through this guide coat, and there should be no metal. Everything should be gray. It should be the same color as the primer that we put on it. It should be nice and uniform. And then at the end, when you go from your 220 to 320 to 400, you kind of know the thickness of the material. As you get close to it, you should then start to see it break through, so you know that your primer isn't that thick, but you didn't have to go through and cut stuff below. This one here, honestly, is so bad that we're gonna have to go through and use body filler on it. So this is why, one of the reasons why I get really upset over the last couple of years of hiring people and training and working with people, is because when you know the correct way to do something, and then you see that they're not doing it right, and you talk to them, and they continue to do it the wrong way, and then you get to this point, and this is where I say, it's primer gel. You're locked up, you can't get out. You're gonna primer this, you're gonna sand it, you're gonna reprime it, you're gonna resand it, you're gonna reprime it, and you're gonna resand it, and you're never gonna get to paint. And you're never gonna get the good job that you want to get and that you should be getting. And it's just, it's hard to watch it. It's like watching a train wreck. It's like you're sitting there with like a deer with your headlights, you go just staring at the headlights. You wanna stop this, and you try to, and then people continue to do it, and they can never progress, and the job never gets done and gets done right. And then you know, at some point, you're gonna have to step in and redo everything. And it's a very frustrating thing to watch, and this is why. So point in case, for some of you who've watched our videos before, you know that the reason you put your primer on, and your primer's gray on this case, and then we sprayed a coat. So this actually isn't the 4-to-1 primer. I'm sorry, I should jump back a little bit. What had happened is Lewis and I had to jump in. We knew that it was wrong. We saw that this car was getting sanded with a tiny foam sanding block after it's already been straight, it's already been gone through, and that tiny foam sand block put so much imperfections in it that it set us back catastrophic. So I told Lewis, put our regular primer on it, not the super thick stuff, none of that stuff. We're not hiding anything, just a regular high build primer. Put that on, guide coat it, and let's see where we are and what we have. And unfortunately, this is where we are and what we have. So this gray primer that Lewis put on there is the primer. The black is the guide coat. You spray a guide coat, it's a nice mist that goes across it. And what it allows you to do is, as you sand, and you don't put any pressure when you're sanding. People that are forcing it, they're just stressing themselves out. So you just start sanding it, no pressure. And one of the other arguments I heard online, people saying that you don't cross hatch, you don't do this. You do cross hatch. It's very important to do so, because that cuts out a lot of the different waves and different angles, and you have to approach sanding from every direction to make sure you get all your waves out. So when someone says you don't cross hatch, you don't do that, they're 100% wrong. You have to do that. If you don't, it's a pure luck of God that you were able to do that. So as I'm sanding this, what I would want to see is instantly knocking down our guide coat right to gray, and this would be a uniform gray. But what I'm seeing is some of the white that was underneath here, because the fender wasn't fully stripped. This wasn't a full restoration. It was knocked down a lot, but it wasn't stripped to bare metal everywhere. So there's some of the white paint that was on this vehicle before that you're seeing, which you shouldn't be. And there's bare metal, which you shouldn't be. And there's low spots next to bare metal, which you should not be seeing. This is all everything you don't want to see on a paint job. So we're going to go over and do the same thing on that fender and check that one out. All right, so I know that was the worst of the two fenders, and I'm going to have to try to do this from this side. I'm short, so I can barely see what I'm doing here, but we're going to go through and try the same thing. This was the better of the two fenders. So what I'm just doing is I'm cross hatching it, which means I'm sanding this way at an angle and this way. You never want to go back and forth, because you'll just dig a rut into the fender. And I'm putting no pressure on here, and I'm just trying to see if there's any low spots. And unfortunately, this one does not seem much better than the other one. This is very disappointing when you're doing this and you're at this stage of the game. This is the reason why you're seeing me slow down and want to do everything myself right now, because I just feel you do this, you want to do it right. This, to me, if this ever got primered again and then sanded again and primered again at this stage, it's embarrassing, because you're looking at something that's nowhere near ready to be primed. This one was not even close. It's worse than it was when we started, which is crazy. So now I'm kind of nervous, and I wouldn't mind the car's not here right now, it's in the other shop. I'm gonna want to check the actual whole car itself and do it. And this is just very disappointing, because it sets you so far back that this here, isn't ready for primer. It still needs body filler. It needs to be skimmed. Some of this stuff should have been tapped down. It's just very disappointing, very discouraging. So another thing we're gonna talk about is primer itself, right? The procedures that we use are different. Every job you do in a collision shop is the same but different. And everybody has a different technique, a different style. And there's reasons why. With us, what I like to do is get your metal work done really well. Put your body filler on there. Make sure your body filler is skimmed and uniform. If you're doing a restoration, we skim the entire vehicle. You hear people say there's too much body filler, blah, blah, blah. They don't know what they're talking about, because if you want a show car, unless you want to build a multi-million-dollar car where you have very limited people in this country who could do metal work to the point where you don't need any body filler. And it would take a tremendous amount of time to get it there. So everybody skims it. When you skim your car with body filler, if you start to see big metal spots, big bare metal spots, different colors, different textures, it's usually a sign that there's more going on underneath there and that you're over sanding it. So I always say sand till you see metal and stop, but it's really sand till you're almost seeing metal and stop. Because you want to predict as you're sanding your material how thick it is, so that if you imagine this is the metal and this is the body filler, you want to sand it down until there's a nice even coat going across it and you can almost see through it. But you want that even coat when you're at your final grit sanding. So if you're going to sand your body filler to 220 or 320, say, you want to be at 320 and just breaking through. So you might start to see the body filler breaking through, but you're not really seeing the metal. It's almost like a dusting of body fillers going across there. And if you do that, now when you move to your next stage, you're going to put your primer on. If you do it right and the whole car is mint and you don't need to do 4-to-1, or if you're doing a regular vehicle that you don't want to, you're not worried about long waves, you're just worried about things and dents, you could actually go to a regular high build primer and move forward. If you're doing a show car, like I said before, you would put a 4-to-1 primer on there, which is a very thick, almost spray body filler. And the reason you do that is because you're block sanding large areas. And again, I said it before, you're trying to get rid of the long waves, not the little dings or dents, but the long waves. So you want a nice transition. You don't want this to go out and then in and then out and slowly. That's when you do the 4-to-1. You're going to take a long, hard block and you sand that thing and sand that thing. You guide coat it and make sure there's not a wave or a ripple in there. And if you did really good and you don't break through and you still have 4-to-1 primer, like I said before, you're able to come back and you could paint it if you wanted to. Or you could reprime it and resand it and paint it. Or you could do a wet on wet where you seal it and paint it. But there's many different ways people do it. Usually on high-end show cars, what you would do is you would get your 4-to-1 completely mint and really good. And then you're going to come back and do a nice high build primer that's a very top grade primer. And then you primer, put 2 coats over the whole vehicle again. Then you go through and you're going to block that. And basically you're blocking that just to make sure you're good and to keep some sort of millage on there, because you always want something in between your primer, sealer, body filler, and metal. So you need some sort of millage. You don't want it too thin. So now if you have that primer on there and that's all one color and uniform, you know you're doing very well and you're not breaking through. This stuff here where we're looking at, it's breaking through in so many spots, it's not right. Back to the primer. So there's that aspect of the primer. And then there's a couple different aspects. So one, I have a tech rep who comes in who advises us and is never steers us wrong very well. He does a class on primering, which everybody should take. I wish the companies would allow him to come on here and talk, because he knows a hell of a lot more about it than I do, and he's never let us down with what he does. So he always says you don't need the thick, heavy primers because you're putting more material on that you have to sand off. And then I have people argue, like one of our last technicians argued that that's ridiculous, that when you're doing restorations, you need need tons of material and all this other stuff. They're like, he's right, because if the bodywork was done perfect, and you were sanded to the right grit, and there's no scratches, there's no dings, no dents, nothing you have to hide, and you put a couple of good coats of a thinner primer that locks up and dries hard, and then you sand that, you're going to have less shrinkage, less issues, a lot less sanding. Obviously, you're a better body guy and primer guy at that because you didn't need to put something heavy and thick in. But when you're doing full-length show cars and you're looking for long, slow waves in a large body panel, you definitely need some sort of millage and build up, and that's where the 4-to-1 primers come into place, and that's where I feel like you kind of do need that stuff. So if you're doing a new car, used car, a daily driver, yes, by all means, you'll get away with it. But if you're trying to build a show car, something that you want to sight and look down that car and not see any waves or any ripples or anything like that, then you're going to have to use a thicker and block it with a hard linear block. And then the blocks are another thing too, and I hear so many people arguing about them. If you get your bodywork roughed out in a soft block or a like maybe like a Durablock, you know, where it's a harder foam block, and then you come at the end and you get your bodywork perfect with a Lexan block, yeah, you're fine. That's going to work. Taking a Lexan block from the beginning right up until you're ready for primer is smart because you're going to each stage eliminate that. But I do get it that it seems to cut a little better with Durablocks. And then if you do your final bodywork in the linear block or the Lexan blocks, we use linear blocks here, that's why I keep saying linear blocks. You'll get a better result. When you start jumping forward and start doing wet sanding and buffing, we use the hard blocks. But I do feel personally that using the Lexan blocks for your final wet sand and buffing all the way at the end might be a little overkill, because if you have ripples and waves at that point in your body work, then you're probably in a really rough spot. However, when you're at a super high-end show car, these guys are looking at a level that's so minute that using a longer, harder block on your clear coat could keep some of the urethane wobble really down and in check. So you could see that, but that's going for the top of the line paint, the best of the best. And those paint jobs could easily exceed $60,000. So for the average Joe, the average person, that's in a whole nother realm, but that's how it is and how it works. So I hope some of this helped. I'm sorry that I'm angry. I hate going backwards on the vehicle, but I figured we're gonna use this to show you why you don't do that. I mean, it's just insane. So some of the vehicles we're gonna be showing you on, we're gonna show you how to do daily drivers, quicker, easier stuff that's gonna look nice so you can see it and you can see the difference. And we're also gonna do higher end show vehicles so you could also see the difference on that. So again, I hope this video helps, and please remember, if you like the video, like, share, subscribe, follow, ring the bell. Thank you.